I've been fortunate enough to have this be my one and only contract that I've ever had canceled. Knock on wood. Hey everybody, it's Natasha with Nursing Our Travel Bug. If it's your first time here, I just want to say welcome. I am a travel nurse and I go all over the country with my husband Bill, our two kids Bella and Will, and our dog Bernie here in our fifth wheel RV. So if it's your first time here, make sure that you hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you can be notified every time we release a new video. We do travel adventure videos, RV maintenance videos, and travel nurse videos. Today happens to be one of those. I like to call it a travel nurse talk. So I have been a nurse for over 4.5 years, and this contract is our 13th here in Reno, Nevada at Renown Health. I know, unlucky number 13. Well, I have to say with this contract, we were both lucky and a little unlucky. First off, we were lucky because we got to do this contract with friends. My friend Carolyn and her family of Diary of a Family took a contract at Renown in Reno as well. So we got to hang out together and our kids got to have playmates. Our husbands got to hang out while us mamas went to work. So that was very awesome. The second thing we were a little unlucky about was we took this contract during COVID season and had to deal with all of the lockdown issues. So we'll get into all of that here in a little bit. Before I get into the review of Renown Hospital, I first want to talk to you all about the town of Reno, Nevada. It is so beautiful here. Just the outdoor scenery is fantastic. It is the high desert, but although it's the desert, you still see a lot of green in the trees and the shrubbery. And of course, with it being so beautiful out here, there's tons of outdoor stuff to do. We did enjoy getting out as a family and doing some really simple hikes. You definitely have to check out this video here of our little hike through Oxbow Nature Trail, which happens to be in downtown Reno. We also got away to explore Lake Tahoe, and that's only about a 40 to 45 minute drive from Reno, so definitely doable in a day. And oh my gosh guys, it is so beautiful out there. So much to do, beautiful little quaint cities along the lake, so you definitely have to check out Lake Tahoe. Like I said, we took this contract during the COVID season, so a lot of things were closed down. Despite all of the closures and everything to deal with COVID, you know, we still had a fantastic time. We enjoyed ourselves. We enjoyed the scenery. When we arrived, it was the very end of March, so you got to see snow still on the mountaintops. And then when we left in May, we had seen that most of the snow was melted. So it was kind of a cool time to go visit for sure. But Reno is definitely a fun place for anybody to go visit. So as a city, it's definitely a must-see for sure. Renown Medical Center in Reno, Nevada is an 808-bed facility. It is level 2 trauma certified, and it's the only trauma certified hospital between Sacramento, California and Salt Lake City, Utah. So it gets a lot of traffic and it serves a huge population. It is a teaching facility, and folks from the University of Nevada come to practice medicine at Renown. This place is huge. It has 3 main towers, and boy, can you get lost. So it definitely took me a little bit of time to figure out how to get from point A to point B. Because Renown does serve such a large population, it does include many specialties. They are the area's only children's hospital. They have an institute for robotic surgery. They also have the Institute for Heart and Vascular Health, neuroscience, and cancer as well. Renown does have 2 campuses in the Reno, Nevada area, South Meadows and Renown Main Campus. I worked at the main campus, but my friend Carolyn worked at the South Meadows location. So let's bring her on so we can get two perspectives on how this hospital works and what our experiences were like. Come on in, Carolyn. Hey, Carolyn, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Natasha. Long time no see.
Right? So tell us a little bit about you, how long you've been traveling, and your YouTube channel.
Yeah. So my name is Carolyn Seifert, and I am one of the duo on Diary of a Family. My husband Garrett and I have been traveling with our 3 kids since, I'd say, September of 2018 is when we sold the house, left the house, lived in an RV. We left Washington and my one location sort of job at the hospital that I was working at in March of 2019. And so far I've had 4 contracts, completed them all, with this last one being Renown, that I was able to spend with you and your family. Well, yes.
Because of COVID, this whole contract was so different in so many ways, including the onboarding process.
Oh, it was so strange.
Yeah. I kind of like the fact that we did everything virtually. So I could just sip my coffee, sit in my recliner, my lounger, and, just get through all of these modules, because let's face it, every hospital system talks about the same thing. They review the same things. Yeah. So
yep. All the OSHA stuff is all the same. All the OSHA stuff, all of the JACO stuff. It's all Joint Commission. It's all the same. They just put their special little logo on it,
Exactly. I think the thing that was probably the most interesting, though, was the mask fit testing.
Oh my goodness. We were like, okay, where are we going? We found the location, and then it was like, where do we go? We found the door, but it was locked and we couldn't get in, and there were people in there. And then she came to the door and opened it a crack, and we're like, she asked us what questions like, are you having any symptoms of COVID? And have you traveled to Washington and New York and California, I think, were her questions in the last 14 days.
Just wild. And then they only had every 3 seats open, so that we were all social distancing in the lobby, but there was still probably 10 or 12 travelers.
I think they ended up, according to, what CDC and the powers that be were saying, I think they actually had, people started arriving early for the next session, I think. And there were too many people, I think, in the lobby, according to their rules.
Yeah, I have to agree. It was just wild. Now, when I've done my mask fit test for my N95 masks, I've done them by myself, in a little office space.
Right, yeah.
So to do a group mask fit test was a first for me.
Me too, for sure.
Yeah. I think it was so funny, though, the fact that, so this lobby area, because that's really what it was. It was a lobby area. We're all standing 6 feet apart. They put the big hood over your head and start spraying things. And then I look to the left, because they have that wall of windows.
Yes.
And there's that pedestrian just walking by
in the street,
up with her scarf, and just her eyes start bulging out of her head. She's like, what is going on here?
I wonder what she thought, and going home and talking to her family, I walked past the hospital and there were these people and they had these huge hoods on. I'm sure they all had COVID or something.
Right?
I can imagine things just going through her head.
Oh, that poor thing. But yeah, that was a first for me. So the onboarding was weird.
It was very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird. And then having to call in and join those meetings and the slideshow and stuff, and it just being like, wow, this is just so strange.
Yeah, for sure. But like I said, I think I prefer that kind of onboarding, just more casual. I don't know. What did you think?
And you can multitask, right? I think one of the days that you were doing onboarding, you weren't feeling well. And so it didn't matter. You could continue. If you hadn't been feeling well, you might have missed that day. So
for sure.
That was nice.
For sure.
It's tough when you have little kids, because then it's like, I have to do this test. I can't think it's nice to go away from the trailer, be gone, and say, this is my orientation day, and come back when it's all over.
Sure.
But Garrett did his best to keep him quiet, and I just stayed in the bedroom.
You locked yourself away for your
I did. I locked myself away. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Now, after all the onboarding was done, of course, we went our separate ways. You worked at the South Meadows campus with the smaller facility, and then I worked at the main campus. So tell us a little bit what it was like working in South Meadows.
So it's a much smaller facility, but they have a huge surgical suite. And their whole focus is ortho surgeries. So that's their moneymaker. I mean, it's a small hospital in the sense that there's only 3 units inpatient. And then they have the ED and then the OR and recovery area. So my unit was they called it GSU, General Surgical Unit. And it had 40 beds. So it's this big L shape. And you had these 3 pods on one hallway and 3 pods on the other hallway, and a pod was 4 rooms. And the middle pods were single occupancy rooms, and then all the rest were double occupancy. It was really interesting how it was set up. And what I learned when I got my orientation on the unit was that the hospital was actually built as a long-term facility, and that they have changed it over to be an inpatient hospital now. And they were actually on the first floor when I arrived. They were hurriedly finishing up these rooms and getting them prepped. And that was going to be their COVID, sort of overflow unit. We never ended up using it. But what had been on that first floor for a long time had been a long-term unit, like a rehabilitation unit. And they had been renting that space and then had moved their facility or closed it down or something like that. So now the hospital had control of the unit. So I was on the second floor, and then the third floor was a med tele unit. And so they took the telemetry patients, and it was the same L-shaped formation, but then the last 2 pods of one of the units had been closed off and made into their ICU. And they had 8 beds in the ICU. And I think I figured out there was about 24 beds in the med tele unit. So a little bit smaller. I floated up there once. I think they were really great units. They were definitely good size, even though there was only just a few in the hospital.
Sure. So with you being that size and having those pods, how many patients did you have at that campus?
So starting out, because all the surgeries were canceled and we weren't seeing COVID patients, there were 5 patients on the unit total when on my orientation day. It was like nuts. So my orienter and I had 3 or 4, and she gave me 1 or 2 to care for. And she actually had the one patient that had COVID, had been positive. And I took the patient that was a rule out. So it was an interesting day. But later on, as we started surgeries up, or as we started to see some trends, we had a lot of patients come in with pancreatitis all at once. It was very odd. But I would range from about 4 patients and then have discharges and end up with 2 at the end of the day, all the way up to having 6 patients or 5 or 6 patients, and having really busy days because the patients were so sick.
So that's quite a variant in a day. Mm-hmm. How challenging was that?
Oh, it was crazy. For the first couple of weeks, it felt like I was twiddling my thumbs a little bit. And then towards the end, that last month, it was like, wow, I'm learning so much because I'm having higher, more sicker patients, I would say. I had one patient that had a Muse score of 6. And I was just like, I got to keep my eyeballs on this girl. And then another day I had a med tele patient. So because of COVID, they wanted to isolate our unit as a clean unit and send the COVID patients up to the med tele unit and ICU and just keep the COVID off of our floor completely. And so they started sending med tele patients to our unit. So I cared for one gentleman who was needing some IV medication that I don't normally give on a med surg unit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, with having, that ebb and flow and being busy and getting those sick patients, what was teamwork like? What were your techs like?
So I had one tech I struggled with because she didn't really check in, but most of the techs were pretty darn good. And what I really appreciated was the teamwork within the nurses, and the charge nurses were fantastic. I could just say, hey, I'm struggling right now. I got a couple of meds that are late. This really needs to happen right now. And she would either jump in or she would find another nurse who had discharged half her patient load, wasn't getting any more admits because we didn't have anything in the ED, and would say, will you go help Carolyn, will you see what you can do? So I had multiple times where another nurse was passing meds for me, doing things for me. And on the flip side, there were days where I only had 2 patients left and kept going to the other nurses. What do you need me to do? I know it's almost the end of shift. I know you're passing like 5 patients meds this evening. Which one do you want me to do for you? So it felt like we were all there. We've got each other's backs. But here's the caveat to it. Because they couldn't cancel us because of our certain contract, once they canceled us a certain amount of time, they couldn't cancel us travelers anymore. So I found myself on weekends with 2 other travelers, and it was just us on the floor, and their charge nurse was the only core staff. So it was like, we're a whole traveler unit, and we know this job, and we're going to hold each other accountable, and we're also going to, have each other's backs. So it was different. It was so weird.
Sure. So it sounds like it was very traveler friendly.
Traveler friendly, very much so. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, in the end, we did end up getting canceled. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But with everything that happened, even with all of the COVID stuff, would you return for another contract to Renown if it was offered?
So here's the thing. I could have this week put in an application to the facilities, and I declined doing that because of the allergies in the area mainly, and the fact that we just left. And I was like, I'm done. I think I'm done. But I feel like if it was the right time of year, and we were looking for something in sort of that area, I would probably choose Renown over looking at something in like California. I think I would probably go back just for the teamwork. But for my own health, I felt like we needed to move out of the high desert area while everything was in bloom.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Carolyn, and sharing your experience at South Meadows.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this collab that we've got going on here.
Absolutely.
As I said before, I worked at the main campus, and I worked on the Telemetry Unit. This was a 56-bed unit. Not all rooms were single or private rooms. They were, however, pretty decent sized, pretty standard hospital room setup, although they do not have monitors in the room. So if you wanted to get vital signs, or if they needed cardiac monitoring, which everybody does on a tele unit, they have portable monitors that the patients wear. And then of course you just bring over a Dynamap if you need to do your vitals. The patient ratios for this unit were 4 to 5 to 1. Although census was lower than normal because of COVID. So most often I had approximately 4 patients. They do have techs on the unit, and they usually have about 4 techs. So they took about 12 patients a piece. The nurse was responsible for getting the morning vitals and all blood sugars, but the techs were pretty great. They could get the afternoon vitals, of course, all of the bathing, help with patient mobility. And this unit had some pretty fantastic techs. So I didn't feel like I was overwhelmed with those additional tasks. And as a whole, the unit had great teamwork. You do have one charge nurse who doesn't take patients at all, and then they have a float nurse who just comes around and tasks for other nurses when they're in a bind or just really behind. So it really takes a lot of stress and pressure off of you if you're having a rough day or if you've got some patients who aren't doing so well. You definitely have help and support, which is huge when you're a travel nurse and new to a unit or a hospital. Now, Renown did say in my interview that they do self-scheduling. They use Smart Square, but the caveat is the first 4 to 6 weeks, they plug you in with what their needs are. So you really don't get to pick your schedule then. And unfortunately, I just did not have a lot of success with Smart Square, so I didn't even get to pick my second schedule either. So it is a feature that they advertise, but it's not a feature that they utilize. So definitely make sure that if you interview with this hospital, you discuss your schedule with your manager ahead of time. They do not pre-approve days off because they say you self-schedule. So again, communication is key with your manager. Ask about that in the interview. And of course, just make sure that you have a really good relationship with your manager and the schedulers. In my instance, they were really accommodating, they were really flexible, and I really actually didn't have any issues with my schedule despite not being able to pick out the shifts that I needed. Overall, this was a great unit to work on. The teamwork was amazing. I had all of the tools that I needed. It had 3 large supply rooms, 3 medication dispensing machines, so you didn't feel like you were running around looking for your supplies or that you had to wait a long time to get your medications or get what you needed for your patients. The flow of the unit was really great, and like I said, the people were fantastic. Although the hospital is beautiful and I really enjoyed working on the telemetry unit, I do gotta lay down some truth bombs here, folks. This was a challenging assignment because of the whole COVID-19 situation. The telemetry unit that I worked on was made a clean unit. We actually received all of the ICU downgrades for the open heart transplants, and that population is at the greatest risk of infection. So they wanted to keep our unit clean in order to prevent those folks from getting sick and getting worse. So we didn't see COVID-19 patients on my unit. However, being a traveler, we are first to float. So I did float down to the COVID unit just one time. I actually worked on the rule out side. So I was exposed to COVID very minimally. Also, the hospital was locked down, so there were no visitors allowed at the time that I was there. And we also had to wear masks the entire duration of our shift. On my unit in particular, because like I said, we got those open heart transplant patients, we not only had to wear surgical masks, we actually had to wear the N95 masks. So they were a lot thicker. They're very abrasive material. At the end of my 12-hour shifts, I would definitely come home, you know, with the marks around my face, even on the tip of my nose. So definitely it was challenging getting used to wearing that for 12 hours, for sure. But it kept our patients safe. It prevented that particular population from getting an infection. So it's definitely worth it to keep my patients safe. Now, because COVID-19 was in full effect at this time, the hospital had actually turned 2 levels of their parking garage into a makeshift hospital. They added 1,100 beds because they were expecting a huge surge of COVID-19 patients at the beginning of April. So this was just at the beginning of my contract. Fortunately for the population, unfortunately for the hospital, they did not see that large surge of patients. Also, because of the COVID-19, they were only doing emergent surgeries at my facility. So that meant Hospital census was down. People were afraid to come to the hospital, so the ER numbers were down. The hospital was losing out on millions and millions of dollars. So the powers that be sat down to try and figure out how they could cut their spending so that they could stay open. As a result, all of the travel nurse contracts got axed to save money. I totally get it. It's a business, it's a corporation. They got to figure out how to stay afloat. And unfortunately, that's the nature of this business. Even though you have a contract that says you are going to work from date A to date B, it's just never a guarantee in this line of work. I've been a travel nurse for over 4.5 years, and I've been fortunate enough to have this be my one and only contract that I've ever had canceled. Knock on wood. But it's just the nature of the beast. It's kind of what you anticipate could be a possibility when you do sign on the dotted line. So that brings up one really, really important piece about travel nursing. If you're a new travel nurse or you're thinking about getting into travel nursing, you have to have an emergency fund. I recommend having 1 to 3 months worth of savings because you just never know what might happen. And you have to take care of you because nobody else is gonna. So having an emergency fund is huge. It certainly saved us. Now, I work with a couple of fantastic travel companies. Although my contract was canceled, I was able to acquire a new one within about 5 days. However, I wasn't able to start that new contract for 2 weeks. So I was without pay for 3 weeks at a time. So our emergency fund has definitely helped float us from contract 1 to contract 2. So definitely have an emergency fund. So I am pretty bummed that my contract was canceled, and I totally understand the hospital's perspective and why they needed to do that. However, I'm not really thrilled with how they chose to handle the situation. The thing that sucks is that they just didn't give us any notice. They knew on Wednesday, so we had to wait Saturday, Sunday, and Monday because it was a holiday weekend to try and talk to the recruiters and find a new job. I just feel like they could have given us notice right away so we could have time to look for another job. Now, yes, Renown did give us a small $250 bonus to say, sorry, we canceled your contract, but you know, that didn't even pay for the gas to get me from that contract to my next one. But a little bit more advance notice would have been helpful. For sure. They certainly could have handled it a lot better. That brings us to the next question. Would I take another contract here at Renown Medical Center? Well, with that being said, the hospital itself was great. It's very traveler friendly. My unit was great. Lots of teamwork. And Reno itself is a beautiful city, and because of the COVID-19 and because everything was closed down, my family and I don't feel like we really got the full Reno experience. So although the way Renown handled my contract being canceled does leave a sour taste in my mouth, I would have to say I'd give them another shot. I would take another travel contract here at Renown Medical Center.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release a new video or we go live. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Natasha with Nursing Our Travel Bug, encouraging you to get out there and nurse what makes you happy. Bye-bye.